All right, so I'm going to move us on to the next slide. If my screen works here, there you go. Gosh, it worked before. Now it doesn't want to go. It did work this morning. We just tried it. How about I did
On
this?
l'avait essayé.
Okay, I found a way. All right, and just before we do get into our day's activities, I want to acknowledge the beautiful land that we live on. And AVA team came up with a national land acknowledgement at the recommendation of our Indigenous champions on the team, particularly Malcolm King. So our national land acknowledgement is here, but we encourage all Canadians and visitors to Canada to learn about the Indigenous people of the lands on which we live, work, or visit, and become engaged allies together. And as Canadians, in the spirit of truth and reconciliation, we respect the self-determination of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, and their rights and responsibilities and cultures, languages, and the pursuit of wellness. And so AVA is located at the University of Calgary. That's where I'm coming to you from today, on the traditional territory of the Treaty 7 people, which include the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Piikani, and Kainai First Nations, the Tsuut'ina, and the Stoney Nakoda, Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Wesley First Nations. And it's also the traditional home to Métis Districts 4 and 5. And we're so grateful to be able to work, live, and recreate on these beautiful lands. And for those of you in the east coast of Canada, or eastern parts of the country where it's been so warm, maybe you'll be feeling a little bit better to hear that we've had snowfall recently and frost warnings and stuff. So what a very variable country we live in. I even saw that in parts of BC, interior BC, they have quite a lot of snow. So interesting weather. All right, so I'm just going to go on to the next slide, which is just a more introductions. And I also wanted to highlight for you as well this hashtag in the maybe it's not a hashtag, it's a QR code. I'll get to the hashtags in a moment, but the QR code on the right side of the screen, if you could just use your phones and go to that link that the hashtag provides you with when you use your camera app, there'll be a little map for you to click on where you're coming from in the country. So we would love it if you could take a moment and do that. I just want to speak to that before I talk anything else on the slide, so you get a chance to do that fun little activity. We're going to be doing these Mentimeter activities a couple of times in the session to make sure we all have a chance to engage. And also, yes, getting back to the hashtags, if you'd like to tweet about what we are doing today, or follow some of these activities on Twitter or Instagram, or make your own posts, these are the hashtags we recommend. And then just moving into who we are and how we're all gathering today. So you'll hear a lot from myself, Nicole Letourneau, I'm the AVA, the Lions Against Violence University Scientific Director, and Bill Barberg, who is from Insight Formation and been working with us for quite a long time on some of the strategic planning activities that we've been doing. And you'll see he's helping us move into providing guidance to the federal partners in this work that we're doing to identify research priorities for gender-based violence and adverse childhood experiences. So thanks, Bill, for joining us from Insight Formation. Bill comes from it's a Minnesota-based consulting and technology company that he founded and is president of. And he's been doing a lot of work to help groups like ours, but also communities, regions, states, provincial regions in Canada as well, to address complex social and health issues that require multi-stakeholder collaboration. Perfect for the work that we're doing today. And as I said, his background in strategy helped AVA create Strategy Hub, and that we'll be talking about a little bit today. So that's myself and Bill, and we have the good fortune to have translators with us today, Tatiana Yua and Godlove Wafafusi. And we have internship presenters you'll hear from in a little bit, Natasha and Temgua, Anna Ilkichi, and Pumi Dena Gamaj, and Nikita Mitra from different parts of the country. And we have also a number of moderators that we'll all get to know a bit when we do the breakout sessions in the latter half of this meeting. But Sarah Yersich from Simon Fraser, Kara Ross from Athabasca University, Asha Stewart Tufescu from University of Manitoba, as well as Kendra Nixon from University of Manitoba, and Audrey-Anne Legoux from U Laval, and Denis Gagnon from UNB. So thank you to the moderators. And just to give the moderators a heads up, we're going to do a brief orientation to your role again. I know you received a moderator booklet, but just to make it super simple, we thought we would, at the break, we'll hang on while everyone else goes and has a lunch or a snack or bio break, we'll just hang on for a few minutes and we'll give you a quick orientation to what you need to do. And I think you'll find it quite straightforward. So just to give you that heads up in advance. And so we'd also like to, I'd also like to acknowledge our whole team. Carrie Paul and Andrea Dean and Kelly Wu and Alexandria Belzachuk and Sue Marshall and who else? Jason Novick. I'm sure I am forgetting some people, but we've had quite a big team effort to put all this together. So I just want to acknowledge all of them. And you'll see them with the AVA backgrounds when you look at your Hollywood squares on Zoom. So I just want to say a big thank you to our team as well. And for everyone who's joined, we would love it if you could just put your intro in the chat. We'd love to hear you know who you are, where you're from, which region of the country you're from, which treaty territory you're from, or unceded territory you're from, and if you are affiliated within one of the Alliance of Canadian Research Centers on Gender-Based Violence, we'd love to know that as well. So they include, Frida in British Columbia, Resolve in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba, CREVAC in Ontario, RAVE in Quebec, and the Muriel McQueen Ferguson Center, MMFC, in the Atlantic provinces. So love to hear which organization you affiliate with. All right, so I think with that, I can go on to the next slide and just talk a bit about our agenda for today. So I'm going to refresh everyone's memory about what AVA is all about. And I'm going to talk to you about our organizational structure, just in the spirit of full transparency, how we do things. And I think, pull up the curtain there, let you know how we do things, how we organize our activities. I'll tell you about what the research training platform does, and also about the new Women's and Girls Health Hub, and how the Alliance Centers are connected so tightly with not only the HRTP, but also the Women's and Girls Health Hub by virtue of meetings like today's, where we're all working together to figure out what regional and national priorities are. We definitely need our Alliance Center folks involved, and that's one of the reasons why we wanted to indicate that in the chat. We also want to talk about the next steps for all of this AVA work. We do have some, we've made quite a lot of successes already, but we've got to achieve yet, and want to talk to you about our next steps. We also wanted to share with you the results of all that strategic planning that we were doing last year, and how we've had to refresh our plan given that we attained the new funding to be Women's and Girls Health Hub as well, and talk to you a bit about our plan to evaluate what we'll be doing. And then how you access AVA resources. That's really the agenda for my talk. And then the latter half of this whole session will be on research priority setting. And I can't emphasize enough how important this is. We'll be reporting to the National Collaborating Center on Women's Health about what we at AVA think are the research priorities that the country should be focused on addressing. So I fully expect that at some point, the knowledge that we gain from you today, the research priorities that we set together, will become, we hope, a part of the agenda to address women's health issues in the country. So that's the latter half of the session, but this item 1 to 7 is really what I'll be covering. And in between the dot voting and all of that about the regional priority setting, we'll have some examples of some of the internships that have happened in the course of AVA's activities so far. So I'm looking forward to sharing information about that with you. But just to remind you, and as well, by the way, one other thing, there'll be opportunity for questions at the end, but if you have questions, you want to catalog them now, get them in the chat as well, and I'll hear what they are at the end and be able to speak to them. So AVA's mission, this is what was in the original grant proposal, and our mission is to create capacity to transform community health and social services to promote health and wellness of girls, women, and gender diverse people who are at risk or affected by violence and adversity, and to do this in a collaborative way, in an innovative way, and with all the crossing everything, sectors, disciplines, and jurisdictions. And actually, I think it's really important to be explicit about training people to work in this way, so that we can transform community health and social services. And then we hope that by doing that training, we'll reduce family violence and exposure to early childhood adversities to improve Canada's UNICEF rankings for girls, women, and gender diverse people's health and wellness. And, we want to have lifespan positive health impacts. And you're probably aware of some of the dismal UNICEF rankings that Canada's children have been showing up with. UNICEF rates all the developed nations every couple of years, and Canada's children have been on a downward slide over the last 10 to 15 years. And now I think our children are 35th on mental health, 30th on physical health, and 38th on suicidality in this country out of 40 nations or something. It's quite dismal. So it's one of the incentives for doing AVA activities at all. So we really think we need to do things differently. We need to work more closely in partnership with community agencies that serve the girls, women, and gender diverse people who are in those families where those risks are greatest. And it is in the community. It's not in the hospital setting and those sorts of things that have adequate funding. And then the other thing that we are really focused on addressing, and this helps connects us in with the Alliance of Canadian Research Centres on Gender-Based Violence. But you probably are aware the Alliance Centres were established a long time ago after the Polytechnique murders at the University of Montreal, and the government of Canada ever since then, and likely before, but really put a considered effort after those horrific events in which girls and women were targeted just for being girls and women. The government of Canada put funding toward establishing these sister centers of research and education at universities across the country who will be focused on gender-based violence. And despite that effort that's been applied for more than 30 years, I'm sure everyone's aware, but the rates of domestic violence have increased steadily over the last 10 years by 250%. And now every day, in every 1 or 2 days in Canada, a girl or a woman's life ends due to domestic violence. So we're trying to address these issues. I know we're not the only way that these issues can be addressed. We're no panacea, but we really are trying to use with the resources that we have, try to help the situation. So this is what AVA is all about. And our objectives are to transform population and community health and social services to promote the health and wellness of girls and women who are at risk. And to do that, we plan to do the following things. So reduce adverse childhood experiences, especially violence, promote life cycle and intergenerational health and wellness. We want to support families better. We want to help develop, deliver, test, and integrate innovations across sectors, and ultimately reduce health, economic, and social costs of these terrible problems. And just to remind you who is in AVA, and we keep growing. We're a welcoming group. If people want to join, we're welcome people to join, because that's what this is all about, trying to bring everyone together to work on some of these issues in the way that we can around training and knowledge mobilization. So right now we number over 200. There's probably about 215 or so, I would expect. We just sort of stopped counting over 200. But we're really proud of the fact that we are in every province and one of the 3 territories, and work really hard to have representation across the country. We even have international partners as well, one of them being Bill, who's on the call here. And did say, in the spirit of transparency, we really wanted to share with you our updated organizational structure. But I think this structure really says a lot about what we are trying to do. So since we also got funding to become the Women's and Girls Health Hub, we did an organizational refresh. And you can see at the top middle, we have our core leadership team. That's myself and Gwen Monkeo, who's a healthcare provider at CUPS Community Health Services here in Calgary. We have Kara Ross and Ashley Stewart-Tefescu, who are our early career researchers. And really, we're the ones that have a lot to do with what happens on a day-to-day basis. And you can see also the platform advisory committee in this group is comprised of people that meet every 3 to 4 months, and we share with them what we're doing. And we really rely on them to make sure that we are staying the course, and we rely on them for insights and advice around, if you go off to the left-hand side of the screen, all sorts of things around issues that our champions help us make sure we address. So equity, diversity, and inclusion, Indigenous knowledge. We have champions. We have 2, Malcolm King and now Marlon Bennett, who are Indigenous champions. We have Regine King, who's our Black and other racialized peoples champion. We have Kendra Nixon, who makes sure we consider all issues around gender and sex. And we even have an implementation science champion, Ian Graham. So these people serve on our platform advisory committee and make sure that we stay the course. And then on the right hand side of the screen, you see we have a girls and women's and gender diverse engagement committee, co-chaired by people with lived experience of violence, adversity. And we also run everything that we do by them too. And then underneath it all, so to speak, we have our programs that are organized around, the various things that we are offering in AVA. And I'm going to go into more details in some of those areas in a moment. But just to give you a sense of the kind of things that we are doing and how our leadership is operating. And I guess just the last thing to highlight is you can see the Alliance Center leadership on the left-hand side. So the leaders of all those Alliance Centers, I mentioned those sister centers across the country, they are key in our leadership too. And that group meets, the Alliance group meets every few months, and I get to give a report to them about AVA, and you'll see some of them here involved in this meeting, particularly Kendra Ross and Katrina, and even a number of people who, Danny Gagnon from the Mary McLean Ferguson Center, and Sarah Yursich from SFU, and so on. A lot of wonderful people who are part of the Alliance Center leadership who are here today. Okay. And then, all right, so I think the key thing to do to really highlight on this slide is that how we're trying to transform research training. So what we're doing is really a divergent activity, I think, from what's sort of the traditional model of how community health people are educated in academic programs in the country at the graduate level, where they might not have an experience of working with a community partner in the course of their academic studies. So we're trying to fill gaps in that way. And so we have the Triadic Mentorship Program and the Community Engaged Internships that both connect our academic students, our graduate students, postdoctoral fellows, and even some undergraduate students with people in the community who have a different life experience and can share with them, can provide guidance to them on how they might integrate their future career into the community. And that's really what we're wanting to. If we want to make impacts in the community, we need to have a cadre of students that are comfortable working in community and with community. So we have this Triadic Mentorship Program and the Community Engaged Internships, and we're pretty proud of those programs, especially the internships. They're in high demand, and I'll talk a lot more about them on a next slide. We also have developed an online curriculum. All our students can access that, but so can anyone else in AVA, and anyone else in the AVA affiliated agencies can access that curriculum, and I'll talk a lot more about that in a bit, so hang on. And then we provide equity, diversity, inclusion, accessibility training to everyone. Did you know it's free? If you want to have that training, you can reach out to us, and it's free. And it might not otherwise be free because we have contracted with the Canadian Centre for Diversity and Inclusion, and we're paying fees for you to access that training for free. So I've had the training, and a number of our team members have had it, and it's a very good starting point for having appreciation of these important issues. And we also work together around strategic planning and evaluation, and a lot of those meetings that we had before were all about that, and that's partly what this one is about. So we think it's important that we all agree where we're going and how we're going to go there, and the kind of things that we would recommend. So that's the meeting today. We also provide early career research or teaching release awards, and we have a real interest in sustainability in AVA. So it's very important that we have early career researchers involved in our activities, so that I'm going to go away eventually. And so we just want to have and others will too. There'll be turnover eventually in leadership, and so we have early career researchers involved in leadership now, and with the hope that they will take on and help to sustain AVA activities going forward. And actually, in the area of gender-based violence or adverse childhood experiences, we want people who are working in these areas, so we're supporting that. And then finally, implementation science training, and I'll talk a bit more about that when I get into some later slides, but it's really one of the foundational things that we do. Okay, and so we're addressing gaps in research training by conducting collaborative implementation science work together, or at least training people to do that work. So we would like to do that research, and you'll hear later that I've put in some applications for funding to do that, but really we are training people to do collaborative implementation science. And that involves developing, testing, implementing, scaling, and spreading evidence-based innovations and interventions, or as we like to say, solutions to these problems. And implementation science is really about, well, as I said, it's core to everything that we do, but it really is about helping community organizations improve uptake or access or outcomes of the effective programs that they might be delivering. So once, helping people determine effectiveness is one thing, but improving uptake and outcomes of programs that are being delivered is really what we're trying to train this next generation to really be focused on. And we're working across barriers and silos. And I think if when we do our scans of who's involved in AVA, we really have every discipline covered, for sure in the social and health sciences, and some in the more hard sciences, but and we also cross many, it's education, health, social services, justice, and so on. So we really, and of course across the country, so really are trying to do that. And we've also been doing a lot of work around strategic planning, and that's what we'll be talking with you a bit more today in a bit. And so we're trying to fill some gaps that we saw in training that might help address the problem with ACEs and especially family violence in this program where we're trying to develop national capacity. And that's where we come up with our tagline, is working together to make things better, because we really are trying to help improve how the next generation of scholars are trained, and really trying to create the conditions for opportunities for community university collaborations. And then here is just another, you've probably seen this on our website if you've ever gone to it, but this is another way of looking at our programs: the Triadic Mentorship Program, the Community Agency Internship Program, and so on here. But the thing I really want to point out to you is the numbers of people that have gone through these various programs. And for the internship program, we have provided 57 3-month paid internships to date. And at last count, we had another 10 or so pending. So this has been a heavily subscribed program within AVA. And I think it's because community organizations really think it's valuable. And we'll, of course, be evaluating that. But so far, we do think that they are finding it valuable because they keep coming back to us and saying, hey, can I have another intern, please? Or we really loved what we did there. And you're going to get to hear a bit more about what some of those internships have accomplished coming up. So I urge you to look into that. And we've also had 15 triads go through our Triadic Mentorship Program. So that's where a community agency leader is partnering with an academic leader, like a professor, like myself, and co-mentoring a mentee from a graduate program or postdoctoral program. And we've had 15 triads to date, and the students also really seem to like that as well. And then we have, as far as early career researchers go, we have, I believe, funded 4 individuals to date for multiple early career researcher teaching releases. And we have a couple more planned for next year. And with respect to AVA Online, last count, our registrants were over 140. It might have gone up a bit since I caught that data from the team. But this is, and I'll be talking a lot more about what's in AVA Online. I think it's a terrific resource that I urge everyone to look into more. And as far as our strategy development, management, and evaluation work, we've had around at least 80 or 90 people involved in that work. And our implementation science training, that's just been embedded in everything we do, and I'll be talking more about that. So, but here's our AVA Online roadmap. So this is the online curriculum. And I have to give major props to Dr. Kara Ross, she's early to mid-career researcher now, but really her leadership has made this a success. And by the way, if you go through this program, thanks to her advocacy, you are able to get the equivalent of one graduate course credit at Athabasca University. So feel free to ask questions about that too in the chat or afterward. But essentially, we have these 4 streams. We have a focus on women's and girls and gender diverse peoples, violence and adversity, and then women and gender diverse peoples, violence and adversity, and topics in that area, and then girls and gender diverse peoples, violence and adversity, and then research readiness and implementation. So that's all about implementation science. It's sort of our more lay way of speaking about what implementation science means to us. It's like making people research ready in the community to do work with academics so that we can help improve how services and supports are delivered, or to improve uptake and access. So, and then we have the equity, diversity, inclusion, accessibility pillar. So we have these 4 pillars, and then you can get badges at each level. There's different courses in each program. We've partnered, by the way, you see under the girls and gender diverse peoples pillar, we've partnered with the Alberta Family Wellness Initiative to attain a brain story certification for everyone. And just keeping an eye on the time here. How am I doing here? 10:40. Okay, better talk faster or move along. And we've essentially created a lot of partnerships to make this content available. And one of the other partnerships I wanted to highlight is the one with CREVAC. They were so outstanding in enabling us to review a lot of their materials to see what might fit in this curriculum. And thanks to Dr. Katrina Scott for enabling that. Anyway, we're really proud of this program, and hope you can check it out if you haven't already. And then, so here's just some examples of the topics in the women and gender diverse peoples, violence and adversity pillar. So for example, you can read, but for example, there's a co-occurrence of parental alienation and inter-partner violence in family court, more things about family law and domestic violence, recognizing and responding to commonly misunderstood reactions to sexual assault, even supporting clients with traumatic brain injuries and so on. So here's some topics. And then in the girls and gender diverse people's violence adversity pillar, we have topics about adverse childhood experiences and some examples of programs that might address that. The attached program, building resilience in children exposed to violence, and implementing children's rights in family court, and so on. So these are just snippets of many of the courses that we are offering. And then with respect to the research readiness and implementation, one of the partnerships we've created is with the Harvard Center for the Developing Child, and they have something called the Ideas Impact Framework, which is a really great framework for community engagement that we recommend people learn a lot about. And then we have all kinds of other important topics like OCAP principles around ownership, control, access, and possession of data, and work with Indigenous people. And a whole lot of great stuff like normalization process theory. How do you, it's an interview process to figure out how do we make outstanding programs and services more normal part of practice. So there's all kinds of great stuff in that, in all these pillars. I think I've spoken a little bit to this already, so I won't say a whole lot, but the thing that we're really trying to do with implementation science is create the skills in graduate students and in community to understand how to work to improve access, dose, outcomes of programs that I think are effective. And then equity, diversity, inclusion, accessibility, in addition to providing the training for all AVA members, it's integrated through all that we do in AVA. We really think about it a lot. We have advisory committees that speak to these issues as our members that speak to these issues, as I mentioned, but we have guiding principles that we have developed for AVA, and really in things like selection of candidates for various programs, we're really thinking about EDIA. All right, and so now just moving on to the hub. So I'm very excited about the hub activities, and this has given us funding to do these additional things. So convene regional and national meetings in both official languages, like we're doing today. And one of the other things we're doing is creating a meta inventory of evidence-based programs or solutions for the population that we're interested in. And we want to work to foster scale up of these, of what works. And so today is one of the beginning activities in that process. And so how is the AVA Women's and Girls Health Hub intended to transform community health and social services? We have the same ambitions, but just different activities that we can now do to achieve those ambitions. So regional meetings, national meetings like this one, but I just wanted to pause on that second bullet on the right. Establish and support Indigenous Women's and Girls Health Hub. So we were charged with doing that in the grant, and we have done that. In fact, we created 2 Indigenous Women's and Girls Health Hubs, and so Malcolm King and Marlon Bennett both have established parallel hubs that we're funding. And I'm sure at future meetings we'll be hearing about what they're doing in their hubs. But again, it's all to help us achieve this overall aim. And we have a lot of meetings to talk about what we're doing, and engagement and priority setting is really what we're doing today. So that's that second to last bullet. But the other thing that just maybe say a bit more about is my team has been working on identifying programs and services solutions across the country that seem to have, to see what kind of evidence there is in support of them. And this inventory will be grading, evidence in support of these programs, and even identifying where there isn't evidence, and maybe we need to do something to help identify evidence. And in order to have an inventory of what people are doing and what works or what we think might work across the country, and we're hoping to be able to share that with everyone in the future. And so some of the things are the AVA Health Hub impacts, and some of the impacts that we're looking at achieving with the Women's and Girls Health Hub are very similar to the Health Research Training Platform. But again, it's about being more equitable and evidence-based and gender sensitive in the work that we do. So you can see how the various activities are going to contribute to that. And we're always so concerned about diversity of perspective. So the hub is equally concerned in making sure that the lived experiences are represented on the team. So for example, our Girls, Women's, and Gender Diverse People's Engagement Committee. And I spoke this a bit already, but just to be really explicit, our Alliance Centers, the leads of the Alliance Centers, so at the various centers across the country who are, you can see all the logos here, they are our co-principal applicants, and providing mentorship as part of the AVA Health Research Training Platform. But others can also obviously provide mentorship, but we're really counting on them because they're so well connected, really counting on you because you're so well connected in the community. And of course, the mentor, these agency leads have other involvement with the core leadership team as well, as I showed you on that org chart. And you'll be able to have access to all of these materials after. So we just thought you might like to have these links in the slides, but if you're interested in any of these programs, these are the links to the application materials. I think one of the things to note is that, some have deadlines, the first two, but the community agency internship is just an ongoing intake, as great programs, great agencies need support, and great students come to us and want to do something. We're just Carrie's our penultimate matchmaker the team, and doing matches all the time. And then you can access AVA Online anytime. And by the way, if you'd like to add or recommend some things that should be on AVA Online, we're definitely open to that as well. And so our next steps are to do research. And I like this puzzle because it really explains, I think, best what we need to do. So we have training, funding for training. We have funding for engagement, like today, and the other activities that we do. We've put a social media branch of what we're doing as well. But we don't have funding. We haven't been allowed to, actually. It's been explicitly rejected as something we should be doing by CIHR so far in the first two grants, but we think we need to be doing research. So we have put in a grant proposal to do research, essentially to support our community partners to, again, improve what they're doing so that we can be more assured that the outcomes that we want are happening with diverse groups of women and girls affected by violence and adversity. And then strategic planning, we've been continuing to do strategic planning in a developmental way, evolving our strategic plan as we go forward, and developing an evaluation framework for that too. So we'll be sharing these, the results of some of our evaluation, I'm sure, in future meetings with you. But just the last few slides here this is the results of all the work that we did together in the last year and a half or so, in combination with the new requirements, new activities that the AVA Women's and Girls Health Hub has tasked us to do. So you can see from this diagram, and this I think is present on our website now, but this is the big picture. And we have a nice little legend here. So anything that's a little bird, those are the original health research training platform activities. And if it looks like a flower, or maybe like a proton and or an electron circulating around a hydrogen atom, that's kind of what it looks like to me. We have the Women's and Girls Health Hub subject there as well. But I'm going to go into what these different circles and shapes mean, so you'll get a sense of it. So this is the inner circle. So if you look back at that, let's go back, you can see the inner circle of rhombuses, and that's what's featured on this next slide. So these are essentially the programs that are happening within AVA. And then the two on the right and left, sort of lighter mauve, those are the hub activities, which we've added in. And then we have the outer circle. These are our objectives. These are the objectives of the Health Research Training Platform and the Hub. So, for example, at the top, multi-level policy and systems change, or the one to the left of that, addressing high needs research areas. Well, that's what we're going to be doing in the latter half of this session, is helping identify what those high needs research areas are to share with the federal decision makers who provide funding for research in the country. So, we really need your input there. And that's what we're hoping to do, to figure out what those high needs research areas are, and then ultimately be able to address them. And so many of the other things on this outer circle I've spoken to already. But I guess the one thing to mention, maybe before I go to the next slide, is sustainable multimodal research training. So really have some thoughts about being sustainable. And the research training that we provide is definitely multimodal in the sense that it's online, it's embedded in community with agencies, and it's also involved in mentorship and so on. And then these are our guiding principles around EDIA and sex and gender-based analysis, and the rights and priorities of Indigenous peoples, which is one of our outer rings. And then our long-term outcomes are to build capacity for the next generation of women's health researchers, reduce ACEs, family violence, and gender-based violence, and transform women's health and social services delivery. So we hope you like that. And you can see as well what we're trying to do there is to reduce ACEs, and that's why that little image just disappeared. And I thought that was a nice touch of the team in building that. But essentially, we're trying to reduce adverse childhood experiences through this work, and especially gendered violence, and promote life cycle and intergenerational health and wellness, and provide more support for families, develop, deliver, test, integrate innovations across sectors, and reduce the cost, the personal and social and economic costs of these problems. So that pretty much sums up where AVA has been and where we're going. I also wanted to point out again our hashtags if you wanted to tweet anything or post anything about this, our hashtag AVA Collaborate for Change and our hashtag AVA Impact. And just before we break for questions, I urge you to, was there a Mentimeter? Maybe it's on the next slide. Now, where did that Mentimeter thing go? I thought that, or maybe it's coming up later. Sorry, never mind. I made notes to myself that don't make sense. But we are going to be breaking for questions. And before we do break for questions, there'll be another one of those little Mentimeter surveys for you. But I urge you to check out AVA's website and our social media. And I look forward to hearing any of your questions. I haven't been able to monitor the chat at all. So you can either enter your questions in the chat now or use the Q&A function to do that as well. So I think that's where I stop.
Perfect. Yeah. So one of the questions came from Purva, and they asked, is there a way to do innovation / research on topic related issues individually or with a group?
Oh, it's a great question. So the best thing to do would be to reach out and talk to Carrie or myself about what you have in mind, and we can see if we can problem solve a way for you to do what you want to do. So it could be individual, it could be with a group. So I think we would try to find a way for you to do something that meets your needs, meets the community that you're hopefully partnering with. I hope that answers your question.
There are no other questions in the chat, but feel free to raise your hand and ask Nicole directly or fill it into the Q&A box at the bottom. That'd be appreciated.
Maybe I'll just carry on then. All right, must have been super clear. All right. Well, then the next thing we have up might stimulate some questions, because we are going to be highlighting the internship projects of our community internships, the community agency internship program interns. We had a number of them, as you heard, but we had a number of these interns come and present to us about their work, and we selected these 3 to share with you. Because I think they represent a nice cross section of work in diverse communities. We're really excited to see a group working in the Northwest Territories, for example. And so we will be sharing Natasha Atangua and Anna Ikichi's work. They're both from the University of Calgary, and they worked at Ruth's House, which is an agency that serves Alberta's African community. And we have Pumi Dinagamaj from UNBC, and she did the work in the NWT that I mentioned with Indigenous people, and as part of the Rural Development Network. And then Nikita Mitra from Simon Fraser, and her work was about building a violence identification toolkit for healthcare providers in BC and beyond. So all these projects were developed in partnership with community agencies, designed to meet needs of the community agencies. So I think, with no further, what happens next? I think I stop sharing and we get them to present. Is that correct?
I did post a question in the Q&A if we have some time while we're getting the video ready.
Yeah, that's a great idea, Bill. That's a great idea.
Any thoughts on expanding internationally? Because many countries have national action plans to end gender-based violence, and a recent report said that very little progress is being made in any of the countries, and most are experiencing regression as the problems get worse, in spite of having created national action plans. I think what you're doing in Canada is great. And any thoughts on possibly working with other countries that are struggling with these issues?
Yeah, well, it has been something that's been on my mind, and I appreciate you bringing it up. I've been looking for opportunities, and this is something that I would want to certainly discuss with the Alliance Center leaders, maybe at one of our upcoming Alliance Center meetings, because I'm sure there's partnerships that could be built upon. But I was recently approached, for example, myself, to support some activities in South Africa, quite similar to AVA's activities. And they put in a couple of groups put in grant applications that I was part of. So I was imagining that maybe we would start that way, at least in my sphere of influence. But And as Carrie points out in the chat, we are presenting at an international conference in Thailand in November. So that was part of the motivation to even go, is to see if we could identify some other potential partnerships around the world. So this is something I'm definitely thinking about, and we've been quite focused on just getting. I see Katrina's put something in there too.
Yeah.
Australia, yeah. So this is something I am definitely interested in. We've been kind of focused on just getting our hub off the ground and that sort of stuff, and getting the research grant submitted. So yeah, part of next steps, you're really pushing me, Bill. I appreciate it. It's been something I've been thinking about.
Yeah.
And if we could, make systems impacts, or at least just raise the profile of these issues internationally and help show how Canada is, could be a potential partner in some international leadership around this, I think that would be terrific. So I'm open to the idea for sure.
Yeah, it certainly is coming together as a model of putting together a lot of puzzle pieces that I have not seen anything close to it. So it's exciting to be part of it.
Yeah, and I do think what we're doing is a little different. I mean, I'm not sure how many other organizations focus on violence against women and girls or early childhood adversity. I really focus on training. Before people get out there in the workforce, like focus on training. So I think our impacts are different and probably quite synergistic with some of the other initiatives that are happening around the world. So great question. Are we ready to go now, Kelly? Do you think?
We are ready.
Hello, everyone. Hope you're having a great time today. And I'm Pumi Lakchani, and I did my internship with Rural Development Network, and I was working for Tahuktit Women's Society in Northwest Territories. Briefly about the Rural Development Network. So they work with communities and partners to build capacity by developing tools and resources, implementing projects, facilitating access to funding and trusted data while amplifying the rural voices. And for Tahuktit Women's Society, they support the society's capacity needs to structure and model an Innu-centered shelter for Innu women and 2S LGBTQIA+ people in Uluk-Haktok in Northwest Territories. First, about the community impacts. Mainly, I help them with two major outputs. First one is a project evaluation framework based on theory of change and indigenous ways of collecting data and Innu societal values. And second output is a reflexive guideline to incorporate indigenous and feminist knowledge into practice. Both of these works incorporate two-eyed scene, which I will discuss in the next slide. While both of them are important documents for Tahuktit Women's Society to report and to apply for further funding in future, the second one, the reflexive guideline, goes beyond the project, and it will help rural development networks' internal practices and community engagement as they work with Innu communities in future. So I'm going to talk about these two outputs combined with my personal learnings in the next slide. So overview of my personal learnings, which are very much combined or connected with the community outputs I mentioned before. So I have four themes of learnings here. First is my learning on history and development gaps in the local context of Canada. And second learning is on incorporating Western knowledge and indigenous ways of knowing in combination. Third learning is on application of feminist theories to practice. And fourth learning is on incorporating self-reflexivity into practice. I'll jump to my first learning. It is about the history and development gaps in the local context here in Canada. So I'm originally from Sri Lanka, which is in global South Asia, and I have a little bit of experiences in the development sector, working with the United Nations and World Bank in a South Asian context. Even with this background, I believe it is very important that I learn to differentiate the differences of local context and development needs here in Canada in this point of my career. And I understood that I cannot apply the same experiences and learnings as they are right now and they definitely cannot be generalized. So this is true when I compare my learnings between Sri Lanka and Canada, but it is also true from community to community in Canada itself. So what I learned about development needs. So within this assignment to work with Tahuktit Women's Society, I learned the close relationship between development needs or development problems of Innu communities with historical and ongoing processes of colonization. It is not my objective here to discuss what I learned about colonization, but making that connection was very important for my work. And this connection is reflected in my community outputs, the ones I mentioned before. And I also learned to differentiate between impacts of colonization on different communities and not to, like I mentioned, not to take a generalized or cookie cutter approach to address these issues. With that, I'm going to go for my second learning. It involves learning about differences between Western knowledge systems and indigenous ways of knowing, but also learning how to combine them in specific situations. So bear with me while I try to explain this learning. It could be a little bit complex, at least for me. To start, again, my experiences with the United Nations and World Bank trained me in a very Western-led scientific method of doing things. For example, I was trained to develop evaluation frameworks based on theory of change or to take an objective approach in developing projects or reports. So as opposed to this, during this internship, looking at indigenous ways of knowing, I learned that knowledge can be relational, and I learned the importance of stories and storytelling as a major knowledge practice as opposed to academic ways of documentation. So while I cannot fully get rid of my experiences in Western-led methods, and I continue to believe in their importance, but I also learned the importance of indigenous method of two-eyed seeing. So in one eye, I still see and use my Western knowledge. And from the other eye, I try to see through the indigenous ways of knowing and try to apply them. This is important for me personally to navigate through my old learnings and new learnings, but I believe adopting this approach is very needed for all of us, especially if we are working with indigenous communities as an outsider. Why? Because as we try to bring and integrate indigenous ways of knowing into community work, the status quo could still be governed by or led by Western-led practices, and at a best, it will be a combination. Here, one, we cannot deny one knowledge system or favor one system over the other. And two, to access financial resources to benefit indigenous communities and to report back, it is very useful to take the two-eyed seeing approach so that we have a language to talk to institutions who understand Western-led knowledge practices without compromising the indigenous ways of knowing. So this is one of the major learnings for me working in the future in this field. In addition to this approach of two-eyed seeing, I learned a great deal from indigenous knowledge systems about land-based healing, Innu societal values, and indigenous ways of ethical data collection. So all of these learnings were applied and integrated in my community outputs. So the third learning, I recently completed my master's in gender studies, so I learned a lot about feminist theories like intersectionality, gender-based analysis plus, or even decolonization. But the challenge here was to find ways to apply them in a very local context to a very specific need here on an Innu-led shelter. It was done in several ways. For an example, we tried to bring storytelling into the evaluation framework, which are otherwise very much led by quantitative data collection. And another way of doing it is taking a case-by-case approach to bring intersectionality into analysis. Likewise, in addition to this, I also learned to connect these feminist theories with indigenous knowledge systems. For an example, I knew about gender-based analysis plus before, but during this internship, I learned about culturally relevant gender-based analysis and tried to apply culturally relevant gender-based analysis into the practices. And my fourth learning is on application of my own positionality. So when I started learning about Innu communities, I realized it was a challenge to match these learnings with my previous experiences. So like I shared at the beginning, I started to differentiate the experiences and learnings and realize this is a learning process, but also very much an unlearning process. It was challenging, and I questioned about my own ethics as an outsider to bring in my knowledge to the project. So here, some feminist learnings came to the rescue. Feminist research ethics emphasizes the importance of acknowledging researchers' positionality in research as a part of methodology. So I tried to practice it here. First comes the acknowledgement that I am an outsider supporting Tahuktit Women's Society while learning and trying to adopt the approach of two-eyed seeing. So this acknowledgement itself made it easier for me to bring cultural appropriateness into the work I did. I was able to be self-reflexive about my previous learnings and current learnings and application of a combination. So particularly when you are clear about your own voice in the work, it makes it easier to find other voices and center other different voices and find solutions collectively. So this is exactly what I was doing. And it was easier to do it that way. And I felt it was ethical to do things in that way as well. So with that, thank you so much for listening. If you have any questions, you can ask or you can write to me. And before I conclude this presentation, I would like to thank the internship program, Tahuktit Women's Society and Rural Development Network, especially Mary and Sabah, for helping me, guiding me, and giving me the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, my name is Nikita Mitra and I was an intern with the AVA Community Internship Program at the beginning of this year, from January to March. I had the opportunity to work with a Vancouver-based nonprofit called the Network to Eliminate Violence in Relationships, with on a pretty prestigious project where we developed a violence screening toolkit for healthcare providers in primary healthcare settings, which can not only be used in British Columbia, but has the potential to be used across Canada. I would like to just direct your attention to the right of this slide here, where I'm quickly going to talk about the project phases that we had in developing this violence screening toolkit. Basically, what we tried to do is we wanted it to be an extremely evidence-based document. We wanted it to be rooted in very sound research. So we looked at the last 10 years of what's been happening within primary healthcare settings when a survivor walks in to speak to a doctor, speak to a nurse, and the kind of experience that they go through, and what are the suggestions and practices used across the world to create world level cutting edge document that could change the way violence screening is even looked at within BC healthcare settings. So we employed the help of SFU's very distinguished librarian to help us identify the correct databases and UN data resources, as well as other gray literature that could prove to be vital in capturing within our scoping review and initial research. So we found 152 articles that had some scope of being used within this within the toolkit. So they could either be for the reason of looking at a certain population, be it elders, be it men, be it immigrants, be it refugees, or articles were selected based on, you know, proven results that researchers and academicians have seen, and even on-ground healthcare professionals have seen in kind of building this entire healthcare pathway to getting help when you've gone through violence. The next step was putting the scoping review into a language, which is transferring the knowledge that we collected into a language that could be easily used by medical professionals and could be easily understood and would also be extremely interesting for them to go through. And this is not a short document. We created 35-page toolkit, right? So to keep medical professionals who are extremely pressed for time, to keep them turning the page, it was extremely important to us to write it also in an interesting manner, to give insights in a way that was easily digestible. So after we created the toolkit content and we designed it, we also ran it by multiple healthcare professionals. We employed the help of Sheila Early, who brought forensic nursing into Canada. We employed the help of nurses that work in different departments in hospitals. So be it, the pregnancy care department, or even just general care. We just wanted a wide range of professionals that could kind of give us their inputs and insights about everything they've dealt with when dealing with domestic violence victims, rape victims, and so on. We just had and we went back and forth on a lot of things, right? One is one of the main parts was creating a questionnaire that could identify both overt and covert forms of abuse. So there was we had to create direct and indirect questioning. We also spoke about, not only delivering trauma-informed care, but also looking at stigma-informed care within that as a subset. We also wanted to, debate about when, survivor autonomy, kind of takes precedence over, the compulsory need to report, right? Where sometimes, if a child is involved, or if another person's safety is in place. So when should a medical professional go ahead and report to the relevant authorities, and look beyond survivor autonomy? So this is a bit of what we did. And before I move to the next slide, I also wanted to say the Network to Eliminate Violence in Relationships works with a lot of partners, and it's led by a registered nurse called Balbir Gorm, who I work directly under. So it's extremely important for them to create these sort of educational resources for people to use practically, because the organization's final goal is to ensure that the community is violence free, and creating these practical tools and resources is extremely important to the organization, and we were proud to have built what we did. So I just wanted to share a short peek to the toolkit, and especially of these three very important pages. The one to the extreme right is what I was speaking about when it came to the direct and indirect questioning. But if you could move your eyes to the left side of the screen, you can see that we had a section also on legal and ethical considerations, where we began with what confidentiality means within the healthcare setting, because many a times patients will come in to a hospital environment or a primary healthcare center and feel, like their confidentiality can be, uh, you know, kind of blocked with someone that they probably know working at the organization, or maybe they don't feel like within like a certain environment with another family member that's there, that certain things might get out in a strange way. So starting from that, we moved on to what I was talking about when it comes to building help-seeking behaviors, and encouraging the discussion between, whether you completely want that kind of survivor autonomy, or if there are other people that are in harm's way, and if the medical professional should act. Um, the page in the middle of the slide also talks about cultural safety and humility. Of course, we spoke about and we built many ways to work with indigenous communities, but on this page we also spoke about sexual and gender minority communities and how to work with them. So we've suggested that doctors speak with their patients from sexual and gender minority community backgrounds who may have a negative predisposition to accessing healthcare because of all the stigma that's regularly faced by them. By going into discussion, by treating them ordinarily like any other patient, by speaking to them about what their pronouns are, how they would like their body parts to be named, for ensuring the routine inquiry does not jump into a surgical questions when it comes to working with trans individuals. So we just wanted to create a set of guidelines for the safety of the sexual and gender minority communities as well. So this is the toolkit. It'll be out very, very soon. We are hoping to launch it as soon as the Network to Eliminate Violence's new website is up. Apart from launching it, in a static manner on the website, I just wanted to talk about some of the impacts that this project will have. One of the things is that we are planning to create trainings and educational workshops around the toolkit, which will be within academic and non-academic settings. Balbir is still a nursing faculty and a healthcare faculty at Kwantlen Polytechnic University. And she's got a lot of this feedback from her students that they would like to know about violence screening, and also the conversations with all the nurses and healthcare practitioners that we had. They constantly said that we wish this was a part of the education that we were receiving, and it would become more general practice for us to screen for violence across all settings. So just taking this feedback in mind, we are going to be designing educational workshops and trainings, and it could also be included in the KPU nursing curriculum. And I just wanted to also point out that this is one of the first BC-specific violence screening toolkits that have been created. So we were, extremely proud to add to this body of knowledge. And from a very personal impact standpoint, I learned many self-care strategies while building self-care strategies for healthcare professionals that deal in a very personal and a face-to-face manner with violence. And having gone through all this difficult material myself on how to stay calm and to disengage with the material, and also continuously understand the sensitivities and the importance of the work that we're doing. And I also, as a communications professional, having worked in the field of communications for about 5 years, it was very important to me to learn the nuances of knowledge transfer and building resources that could work for a variety of audiences, right from the receptionist at a hospital who could probably be the first person to screen for violence, to the medical director of a healthcare organization. And I also learned about how to deal with sensitive cultural groups and um, overcome personal biases about certain victims of violence, and put that into the toolkit to share that anyone could be a victim, and the pathways of discussing violence with various audiences could look very different. So with that, I would like to thank you for listening to me, and you could always reach out to me at my email ID given on the screen in case you have any questions. I would be able to share the toolkit with you in possibly by end of July. So if you'd like to receive that, you could always write to me and I'd be happy to share it with you. Thank you so much.
That was terrific. Thank you. So we pre-recorded those to make it easier on everyone, but we do have some of the interns here who can answer some questions, I understand.
Yeah, absolutely. So I saw Nikita on the list, so I'll direct the first question towards you if you're available.
Sure, yeah.
Amazing. So Nicole asked, how did this experience impact your likelihood of doing work and or research in community agencies in the future?
I love that question. I think that working with Never has shown me that my work could really make an impact, a real world impact. And I think that's so important to feel motivated as a person working in this space. I briefly mentioned that I'd worked as a communications professional in the past, where I kind of felt a little bit disengaged from the impact that my clients in nonprofits and in the development sector were doing, as I was only communicating after a certain program had found its successes and had made its real world impacts. I kind of felt like I was at the end of the process there, uh, but after doing this internship, I felt like I was a part of the process. I could use my sort of experience in creating strategic communication tools and marrying research and communications in such a practical way. So I think that's so rewarding, and it's encouraged me greatly to keep working with grassroots level organizations and contributing whatever I can to ensuring that violence against women and children and men and different groups are abolished in society.
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. It's so inspiring to hear that. So again, so much for sharing all that insight. I guess a lot of people would really appreciate that aspect. And then if Anna is here, I'd love to ask the same question if you're available.
Okay, please, can you repeat the question?
Absolutely. I was just going to ask. So the question was, how did this experience impact your likelihood of doing work and or research in community agencies in the future?
Yeah, I think it has been an impactful journey. Yeah, working with our community. As we all know, our community, we don't really talk about domestic violence, and it is considered as taboo in our community. So most people don't really speak up about it. But with this research, it has been an eye opener to them, and some of them now are like kind of coming up to talk about it and to know the importance of speaking up instead of keeping silent, And to our greatest surprise, when we were doing this through our survey, we found out that there are things that our community does not consider as a as a domestic abuse. Like there was this question we asked about your husband, like withholding your money or what. So some of them said it's not an abuse. So there are so many things. Like I think there are a lot of things our community needs to learn and to unlearn because of where we're coming from. So, and that's exactly why we're doing this, to change that narrative. So yeah, and our community, they have been so supportive, and they also embracing what we are doing. We had our last focus group yesterday with one of the communities in Africa, and the turn up was so great. And yeah, people are like now understanding the meanings and the meaning of domestic abuse, and also how to access resources, because before, the problem our people have sometimes is that shame and the stigma. But now, with Root House being there, it has kind of opened their eyes to understand that they don't need to keep quiet or to die in silence. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights. I'm so glad to hear that the community is being supportive and your focus groups are very engaged with all of this. It's really fascinating and exciting to hear. And I'll keep you on for a follow-up question if that's all right.
Oh, sure.
Absolutely. Okay, so it's going to be, did this work inspire you to continue to do work with gender-based violence or early childhood adversity in the future?
Of course, yes. Before, though, I was not thinking to, when I was completing my BSW, I was thinking about going into mental health. But when I got job with Root House, I think I started, because it's something that has been in me, that like helping people, But now working closely with my community, I've kind of like changed my perspective. So yeah, so I really like it, and I believe it's something that that I will continue doing in my line of my practice. Thank you.
Amazing. That's great to hear. So you answered the follow-ups on that question as well, but I'll switch to Nikita if you'd like to respond to the same question.
Sure. I definitely want to continue my work in this space. I felt very passionately about this project. However, like throughout the project, I kept also questioning my own sensitive nature, because I am an extremely sensitive person. Um, Things that I read or watch like deeply affect me, and it is a a difficult space, but such an important space to be in. And I just realized that through the course of the internship that um, even though the material is quite difficult, it is, very, very rewarding to help folks that are in these unfortunate situations with gender-based violence. And I hope to continue creating some sort of impact while also battling with these sensitivities, and just getting better at dealing with tough material. Yeah.
Definitely. Thank you so much for responding to the answer. Before we switch to questions for the supervisors, I just want to give everyone, the interns, another round of applause just for those amazing presentations and all their hard work. So thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate it. Okay, everyone's clapping. Amazing. And then I think we're going to switch gears into questions for the supervisors. So I think Balber responded, but I'll read the question out, is how did this experience support your agency's work? And would you recommend others take advantage of the opportunity? And Balber in the chat responded that their experience at Never is very positive, because they're also a faculty, so they're able to help students translate literature into actionable items, and that their goals are to produce resources for partner agencies to use. What I would like to do is to connect with others that are doing similar work, and also connect our resources through AVA across Canada so that we can evaluate, revise, and reevaluate. So we can set up SurveyMonkeys to collect data. And I was just wondering if any other of the supervisors part of the internship program had any follow-ups or wanted to answer that question.
I can speak to this as well. Sorry, I'm like struggle city over here, losing my voice. So absolutely would recommend this program to other folks and other organizations working in gender-based violence. And so PUMI's work with Rural Development Network and Tahiti Women's Society, like both the evaluation and reflective guide, it's one of those things, I guess, that will is going to primarily support TWS in their ongoing work in Uluhuktuk. As a big gap in their capacity is at times the ability to align their needs with the expectations of funders. And then so with the application process and reporting to funders, like trying to align the language and practices in their community in a way that translates into what the funder is looking to evaluate. And so again, the evaluation and guide is really going to bridge that gap and be an accessible point of reference for Tahiti Women's Society. And again, like just to emphasize, Pumi like did a lot of work in reflecting just in her own positionality in the work that she was doing, but also even understanding her own gaps in the work, because it became a very abstract project direction we went in because we had to be super flexible. That's the other piece of it, is like that ability to be flexible in this project work with small communities up north. And so I think that we were able to, you know, with me working with Tahiti Women's Society and kind of bridging that connection with Pumi in the work, be thoughtful in a way that acknowledges the values in the community and how it may impact the way we typically work. So I think Pumi, you know, that was a big takeaway that she was mentioning for herself, and whether it be through the language we use, practices, in how we support those experiencing violence, you know, that guide is going to support that importance in being flexible in how we work together, but also how we can be thoughtful and consistent in learning from Indigenous communities in the work we do, and incorporating their values and ways of doing things into ongoing work. So sorry, this is all over the place. Again, struggle city over here, I'm sick. but yeah, so it's just been a great experience with Pumi. AVA's been so supportive in providing training and guidance throughout all of this. And anyway, I've just been so impressed with Pumi. She's done excellent work. So hope that answered the question.
Yeah, that's terrific. Want me to wrap up, Alexandria? We can go into our break.
Go right ahead.
Okay, great. Yeah, I just want to say thanks so much to the interns for presenting and for being here to answer questions. And Mary, it was great to have your, and pardon me, Balbir's comments as well as intern supervisors. We really want to urge people to think about how they might build this into their own work or research programs for that matter. Because in Balbir's case, as she pointed out, she is an academic who is also in a community agency role. So I'm just looking at some people on this call here who potentially benefit from having an intern in a community agency that they partner with, you know, so you don't need to, we're very flexible, essentially. If we can find a project and a great student experience and a partnership between a community agency and a student, that's great. We can also bring in academics. Academics can try to connect with this program as well. And I think it's a great way to get some really innovative, important work done that maybe a community organization might not have the funding to do otherwise. So that's what we're hoping to do. So thank you so much. And I think now we're right on schedule to go into our break. We're going to have a 25-minute break here, come back at the top of the hour. But before you go, and this will be apparently on the screen during the break time, use your phone and check out these QR codes. And if you wouldn't mind just answering a couple of quick survey questions for us about this, we will present the results of our group's responses here later on in the session. But I think that's it. Are there any housekeeping items anyone needs me to touch on before we let everyone go for lunch? Okay, great. And Sula's put something in the chat or lunch or coffee or whatever it is for you, given your time zone. The only thing is the moderators, we'd like you to just stay on for a 5 to 10 minute quick orientation to the afternoon session. So if my memory is correct, that's Sarah Yersich, Kara Ross, Kendra Nixon, Ashley Stewart-Tefescu, Denis Gagnon, and Adrienne Lagou. I think that's everybody. Anyway, if you're a moderator and I didn't put you on the list there, stick around as well. We'll just give you a quick orientation. Everyone else, you can go have a break. We'll see you back at the top of the hour. Music stopped. I hope you liked our musical interlude. So welcome back, everyone. I know that Bill's slide deck is going to be coming up in a second, and I'm going to turn it over to Bill Barberg.
All right, I'm just sharing my screen here.
I think you need to pick the screen you want to see, everyone, at the top of your Zoom windows. You can pick French or Bill's. There you go.
All right. Well, I'd like to welcome everybody back. It certainly was an inspiring first session to see all the great work that's being done. And in this next 30 minutes, we're going to be looking at just a quick introduction to the Insight Vision platform that's supporting all this information. And then we'll be going through the first of the 2 dot voting exercises. So as you've seen, the strategy map for AVA has a lot of different elements in it. And in this view, we're seeing it in the Insight Vision platform, which is an online community strategy platform. And the content in here can actually be embedded in the AVA website or in other websites for the different centers or other places with this shared structure of a wealth of information. Because when you look at all of these different pathways, each of these is really just the tip of the iceberg of a bunch of additional information about how and why and progress on these various topics. So with the interactive capabilities, either in like the AVA website or other websites, you'll be able to click on any of these elements and it will bring up more detail. And that detail that will pop up is very flexible. There'll be descriptions that can be easily edited. There will be measures for quantitative evaluation. And there's a flexible set of tabs across the top that can show things like accomplishments, or as we heard, it's important to capture stories as part of that indigenous way of knowledge sharing and knowing. And so being able to capture either text or video stories on these different elements is also a key part of this. When we look at the AVA work, it's really focused on building on work that's being done on these broader sets of issues around violence and adversity. And we've really tried to build on the National Action Plan and the various provincial action plans and the roadmap for the National Action Plan to develop some of the details of the strategies and things we'll be looking at today for research. And for the early childhood adversity, we're building off the work that's been done over the last 4 or 5 years with the ACEs and Resilience Resource Commons for communities, where they've been building out as a strategy map and also a wiki. And I'm not going to be able to go into this in much detail, so we're creating some videos that we'll be sharing after we incorporate the content from this workshop. But I do want to show an example as we go into the issues of violence against women and gender-based violence. We can click and we can see a graphic showing the 5 pillars of the National Action Plan. Pillar 1 is support for victims, survivors, and their families. And the plus allows us to zoom in further to some of the key objectives organized by things like funding and staff, programs and services. And as we've taken this content from the framework of the National Action Plan, some of these topics are very suitable for research, bringing a lot of value. So for example, the objective to improve the health, safety, development, and well-being of staff in the gender-based violence sector, that begs a lot of questions. What kind of programs, practices, policies are most effective at improving these elements? What works, what doesn't? Research can bring a lot of value there. So that's one that would be more relevant for the kind of thing we're looking at today. Other things, other objectives, also very important, like increase operational and core funding for gender-based violence services, is more needing funding rather than research. So as we've gone through, we've begun preparing for this chance for you to really provide your input through these 2 dot voting exercises we're going to be doing. The first being minimizing gender-based violence. And for each of these sessions, we think the 30 minutes should roughly be broken down into 3 sort of groups of things you're doing. The first 10 minutes, we'll make sure everybody gets to link to the dot voting website that you'll be using, and then have some discussion about the list of 28, I believe, topics that we pulled together. Then we want people to just kind of be quiet as they go through and apply their 15 dots, which I'll explain in a moment, and then have some time for additional comments or discussions, maybe making the case of why others might want to adjust their dots for a particular topic, or adding other comments, as I'll show you how to do in a second. The big challenge in doing this, and a question people often have, is where did you come up with the list of topic statements? And over the last couple of years, we've done several workshops with many of you participating in those, and that was one source of the topics, but we also pulled it from the work done by others from those two different efforts of work that I mentioned before, the National Action Plan and the Roadmap for the National Action Plan, and the ACEs and Resilience Resource Commons for Communities. And that ended up with a much longer list of topics, and then we had to kind of hone that down, looking at AVA's strategic objectives as they've been funded for, consideration of AVA's scope and capacity of what kind of things should be more in scope, and the appease criteria, which I'll look at in a moment. So this is the list that you were sent the list in advance that you may have had a chance to look through. If not, you'll just look through it here in this next 30-minute section. A couple of things to be thinking about as you're voting with your dots. We are not just trying to say what is the worst problem or where is the problem that needs the most research, but we're really trying to look at how research can shift to advancing the solutions. So be thinking about where will research be most valuable in advancing solutions. And also you'll notice that the topics are not specific programs we're trying to evaluate, but rather areas where research can improve our ability to create and implement positive change. The appease criteria is a good way to also think about things. It's the letters for appease start off with A for affordability. The more something is affordable, usually the greater the impact, where maybe research knowledge can really allow something to scale up that's affordable. Similar, practicality is helpful. If we're researching things that are more practical, that's going to allow us to implement them. Much of the effectiveness we may not know, but we can have a hunch that it would be effective, and that's why we want to do more research on it. And also thinking about things like acceptability or side effects, which we want to be at least trying to think about proactively, and really looking at for things that could help most improve equity. So keep those in mind as you're voting. So when you're in the actual poll unit dot voting page that you'll be getting the link to, these first set of questions is about minimizing violence. And as I said, we're looking at which topics are most in need of additional research. Another way of phrasing that question is, where would additional research enable the greatest impact for improving outcomes related to violence? So this is a chance to really think about, in many ways, how research dollars can be allocated and how research projects can be prioritized. You'll have at the top of your list of 26 options how many dots you have available. As you begin applying dots, you can add 1, 2, or 3 dots to each of the topic. I recommend you use 1 dot for your first roughly until you have maybe 3 or 4 or 5 left. Then go back with those last ones and maybe add a second dot to the things you feel are most important to give added weight to those. And you can change the dots after you've checked them if you decide you want to reallocate them. Now, when you try to do your first dot voting, it's going to pop up and ask you 2 questions: which province your organization is located in, and then there's a drop down of which best describes your role, and then you'll click save. And that can help us with some analysis as we look at the dot voting. In addition, really at any time during this time you have this pulled up, you can click on the plus here, and actually either one of the pluses take you to where you can add comments. And this can be useful. We're allocating especially time after you've done your dot voting to add comments, because we want you to try to get through your dot voting and not get caught up trying to spend all your time typing comments. But after you've got through your dot voting, you can go back and click on the plus here to add comments, maybe why you think this is important or what some of the questions are that are going to be most important. And when you go to add a comment, it is going to prompt you to put in your name, because the dot voting is anonymous, but comments will be associated with your name. And you can type in the comments. So many of you can be adding comments in parallel. So the basic instructions in just a couple minutes here, you'll be getting the ability to go into breakout rooms, and you'll choose the breakout rooms for the province that you're from. And each of those rooms has a pre-designated moderator. They will initially share their screen, and they will give you the link in chat that you can use to go to that poll unit screen like I just showed. Once you've got that pulled up, you can then go back to the Zoom screen where you can be looking through the different topics and having some discussion of which is most important you feel in your province. You'll be able to switch between the Zoom view and then whether your browser, where you can actually do your dot voting and add your own comments, especially during that 10 minutes where we want people to just kind of stop talking and get to their dot voting. And then the moderator will tell you when there's, probably ask, is everybody done with their dots, or do you need a couple more minutes? And hopefully there'll be some time where you can be having discussion and using that discussion time to add some of your own comments, or the group comments will be part of the recording. So any questions on that? Since you roughly have dots for half of the options, as you go through the list, thinking you want to basically try to think every other one, I mean, not in that order, but about half of them, you're going to be able to give one dot, and a few of them, a couple of dots. So sometimes you start going through saying, oh, this is important, and you've used up all your dots before you get to the end of the list. So as you go through, as you discovered in that time, you can only apply dots to roughly half of them, especially if you're going to give a couple extra dots to a few of those. Were there any other questions or comments or problems people had in the first session? Because this next one is going to be almost identical, but dealing with early childhood adversity.
Yeah, I just might say we had no problem filling the time.
Yeah.
This is what, why do you like this one or that one? Is there any that we shouldn't consider? Like, why would, does any of these suggestions align with your organization or your own needs, priorities, so on? And so there's no problem to fill the time. I don't know if everyone else had the same experience.
Not enough time. I feel like the conversation gets going and then it's time to jump. Yeah. So
yeah.
Well, and this is the beginning of a journey as we capture the highest voted ones, but there'll be opportunities for others as well, is to dig in deeper of what are the questions, why are the priorities. And that's the whole strategy aligned research, is that we want to continue to build out these questions, look at what research has been done, what questions are being prompted by previous research, and just be more aligned in efforts to do that. So this is just part of the journey. It's not the end of the road, it's the beginning.
Yeah, that's great, Bill. And I just want to emphasize again for everyone, like, why are we doing this? We are doing this because we are part of this national network of women's and girls' health hubs. We report to this coordinating center, which is going to be like an institute at the Canadian Institutes of Health Research eventually. I think that's the plan. But that coordinating center wants information about what are the research priorities. And we are the only hub that has to do with women's, gender-based violence and adverse childhood experiences. And we want a piece of that funding pie to address the needs in our community. Like, that's what we're here for. And we're being very strategic, because not only are we suggesting what the priorities are, we are working on them. So we'll be primed to get at those dollars when the time comes. And I'll be able to say to that coordinating center, we had a big consulting process that helped us identify these, and it'll actually persuade them even more that these are things that we need to be working on across the country.
And as we show coordinated efforts with lots of different research projects, and that information just isn't evaporating, it's being built and put into practice and having impact, I think that will address some of the skepticism that some people have about research funding, and help them see that the return on that investment is going to be greater because it's going to be less fragmented, more proactive, more intentional, focusing on solutions, not just researching the problem again and again and again. And that's the part of the change we're trying to help bring about.
Such a good point. And having the community agencies here and people that work in the community telling us, yes, this is an important thing or not, is really important.
Yeah.
Because we want to have this research that we do actually have impact in the community where the families and women and children are.
Yeah.
So, okay, so I just wanted to drive that point home again. That's why we're doing what we're doing.
So again, this next set of topics is dealing with early childhood adversity. We're going to go through the same process. You can talk about things, go through, quietly do your voting, and then have some additional topics. And if you have time, you can hit the little pluses by those little voice bubbles and add comments, or you can make the comments that will be captured in the recording. So we're going to go back to our breakout rooms.
Okay, thanks. All right, we're starting back now with Bill.
Yes, we should be.
Okay, great. My group finished early, so they got a 5-minute break. Hopefully they all come back.
Chatted for longer. I think we could have chatted for longer. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's always
good.
when it gets good, we start getting kicked out.
Yeah, sorry, Natalie, you got cut off there.
Yeah, I'm so glad we recorded. And again, they're just for internal use because it didn't mean that us moderators did not have to take time to write everything down. Really good. And with AI now, you probably can just transcribe very easily. So, all right, Bill, back to you.
Yeah, this is the beginning of these discussions. So we hadn't talked about using this time for the Menti responses. I know Steve is still tallying up the different groups, but whoever was doing the Menti polls, did you want to take a couple minutes to look at those here? And then I can show you the work-in process that we have of combining the provincial topics.
I have in my slide deck for the closing, Bill, I have the Mentimeter responses. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I was just wondering if you wanted to take a quick look at those, because it turns out that the questions all get reordered based on the number of votes, so it's not as quick to just copy them into
Oh,
this
okay, well, sure. Then I can
spreadsheet.
share my screen and just
Okay,
do
why
it
don't you do
quickly.
that?
Yeah, that's a great idea. Okay, so let me just share my screen, everybody. Are you okay with that, Kelly? Hopefully that won't
Sounds good.
put you out. Okay, I'm just going to share. And then I'm going to, okay, which could I pick? Did I share a screen here? So hang on, I'm just, which screen am I even sharing? Can you see my slide deck, everybody?
Yes.
Oh, okay, great. I'll just do this then. All right, so I'll come back to that in a bit. Oh, I had something. Oh, this is the slide I want here. Okay, so the Mentimeter results from the little surveys that we did during the break earlier, we asked the question, what change is needed? Can everyone see this?
Yep.
Okay, great. What change is needed to reduce gender-based violence? And well, you can all read, but I'll touch on some of the responses, breaking down the silos between researchers and agencies, which I thought was great, in lines with what we want to do. Empowering women, girls, and gender diverse people, sharing experiences, embedding GBV into primary, secondary, post-secondary curricula. Yeah, I think that aligns with the other one here on the bottom left, providing better education to all genders about gender-based violence at all levels. So education maybe starting in schools early about gender-based violence. And then improving collaboration between service sectors. So that we're trying to do here. Providing resources in different languages to reach out to ethnic minorities, better understanding and responses to coercive control. Better adoption of practice of strategy management at scale. I guess I can guess who wrote that. And I can guess who wrote this one too, but I won't divulge my guesses. Many things, but one that comes to mind is greater economic freedom for those most vulnerable gender-based violence. Yeah, so they can leave and support themselves. And similarly, addressing poverty is critical. Okay, so yeah, some definite themes there. And then there was more though. Empowering women around breaking taboos. Teaching women and girls to speak to someone if they're experiencing gender-based violence. Again, there's themes that sort of show up here, aren't there? Equitable, inclusive services for women and girls. Government powers need to make it a priority to address gender-based violence and enable upstream actions. More coordination for the NAP implementation across Canada. Yeah. More work must focus on perpetrator rehab and education programs to address root causes. And trauma-informed culture and sustainable funding for the sector. Absolutely, sustainable funding. For me, that kind of aligns with the NAP implementation too, somehow. So any thoughts about any of those before we move on to the next Mentimeter? You can throw something in the chat too. Someone could read what's said. I'll pause a moment and see if anyone has anything you want to add or comment on. Not hearing anything. I'm just going to go to the next slide then. So what change is needed to reduce adverse childhood experiences? Again, similar answers. More funding, address childhood poverty, bring down barriers, standardize national family support systems, including accessible mental health care. That is increasingly challenging in our country, isn't it, to standardize things across provinces. Create and implement more upstream interventions. Commitment and action at all levels of government on reducing toxic stress, such as poverty and homelessness. Better childcare and parenting programs for free. Improving services. Again, there's a lot of themes that show up here. Support for substance use among parents. I suppose to address the substance use for sure. Stronger supports for children and adolescents experiencing ACEs and trauma-informed training for healthcare education professionals that work with youth. Education, this kind of goes together with this one. Education to help people understand the impact of ACEs and trauma. Support for early intervention programs, especially that address social determinants of health and poverty, which get at these funding ones. There's some definitely funding ones. If I could draw lines between some of these. And then better support for all communities with specialized approaches for different types. Providing better resources for parents and families to support children and adolescents. So this is what came out of our Mentimeter. Very interesting stuff.
All right.
Just like, you're ready now, Bill?
Ready enough.
Okay.
So,
great. I think I've stopped sharing.
okay, I will start sharing. Actually, I think you are still sharing. There we go. And now I will share. So because the order switched, it wasn't quite as fast to get all of this translated over, but I'll show you what we are doing. And the preliminary summary that we have here. So you should be able to see the screen share. This is the minimizing violence ones, and we have a column for each one of the groups. And as we're filling those in, we're beginning to see a total. And the highest voting topic so far was improve access to GBV services in rural, remote, and northern communities. And other high ones, improve coordination, connection, and data system integration across GBV support and service sectors. Improve and extend services to keep women and children safely in their homes rather than leaving. That's always gotten a lot of positive feedback in discussions I've been in. Help men heal from their own trauma and develop relationship skills so they don't use coercion or violence. Improve access to culturally appropriate services that mitigate risk factors for vulnerable and marginalized populations. Those were all the ones that had more than 25. Oh, here's one more. That so far. And these numbers will change as we fill in the last couple of columns. Develop and refine effective two-generation interventions to address the impact of violence. So as we get this finalized, we'll be sharing it, we'll be reviewing the comments and be getting back with kind of a post-workshop report to people and seeing how we can then begin really looking at what are some of the research type of questions or possibilities that research could be uncovering in order to advance these. And in some cases, it will be advocating for money, but the main thing that we're controlling here is research and training. So we're wanting to see where that can have the greatest leverage. So yeah, this is basically how we're going to be summarizing and doing some analysis and other analysis and coming up with our top, several of these lists that we will use to be the first ones we have additional discussions on. And eventually those deeper discussions could cover many of these topics, because I think you can recognize that many of them are important. So that is how we're doing. And I'm going to stop sharing and maybe open it up for any other questions or comments or thoughts about this dot voting and prioritization exercise that you might want to have captured for the record, or get others to respond to.
Did BC not get recorded? I see under BC, I didn't see any votes.
Oh, it had just they haven't been
still working
they
to
haven't
get those
been
updated.
yeah.
Oh, I
Because
see.
they were in a different order, it wasn't just a matter of just type them in, go down the list. You had to kind of search and find it. So it took a little bit longer than we expected. So all of them will be recorded.
Thank you.
And there was comments about, wanting to have more time for discussion. And when we looked at doing this, it was like, should this be a 4.5-hour workshop, or how long can we get people to come for? And we then thought 2.5 hours, and it was like, we just can't, that's not going to be enough time. So it was sort of a compromise between how much time could we allow and to get people to carve out of their busy schedules and have discussions. But the topics that we've identified here should be the start of further discussions in capturing needs, different types of things that you'll see in the weeks and months ahead.
And I see 3 people have their hands raised: Kendra, Kara, and Kathleen. So I'm not sure if you can see that, Bill, but
Yep. So start with Kendra.
Sure. Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Nicole. Well, it was just Marcy and I in the Manitoba group, but we were very we were very thoughtful. One thing that we talked about is, oftentimes we have a lot of research in particular areas, and what we don't have is research on how to move those research findings into actual practice, or to get the political will or the decision makers to actually implement those evidence-based findings. So I would be very curious to have more research into jurisdictions that are, have had better outcomes of actually how to translate evidence into more supports for gender-based violence. Because I think that's where things tend to stall, is we can have lots of great research, especially, in collaboration with our community partners, but there isn't the political follow through, or decision makers don't pick it up. So how can we get decision makers to actually implement the findings?
Mm-hmm. And some of that may be research on return on investment, social return on investment, things like that, in some cases. Kara.
Yeah, I also wanted to, there was a couple topics that came up in our discussion that weren't listed as some of the dot options. So I put it in the chat, but I also wanted to make sure that it was just shared with the larger group too. So for the violence question, one of the possibilities that came up was the importance of teaching the current generation, or the youth, about relationships and what is a healthy relationship, and what is violence, and what should be, what shouldn't be tolerated, as a way to get to, let's prevent it before it even begins, kind of a thing. And that was something that wasn't on the list, but it's like, oh yeah, that's really important to do as well. And then for the adversity, what also came up was emphasizing relationship development for youth. And I'm so sorry if I butcher this, so whoever brought this up, please correct me. But how I understood that was that, especially post-pandemic, the current youth have, their relationship skills have been compromised, and that might be affecting how adversity is experienced, and also their ability to connect with community and friends to buffer the experience of adversity. So those were things that were highlighted as possibly important as well. Thanks.
And Kathleen.
Hi. Oh, sorry. I can't seem to take my camera off. Yeah, I just wanted to touch on 2 things really quickly. And one was just touched on, that I do think that we are going to need to start looking at the effects of the pandemic, particularly on child development, which will affect diversity. Where I work, we kept all of our services open, and we actually expanded to do some outreach and some online, like outreach to homes and hotels and online. And we can see the different development with the young parents and their children that got to play alongside of each other. We created these play pods that were physically distanced, but they could still socialize alongside of each other. And the social emotional development is incredibly different between the children that didn't come and the children that did, and the confidence and their, you know, ability to approach people. The other thing is we're seeing huge changes in increases in developmental and challenges for kids and children on the spectrum. And I don't know if that's environmental stuff, but I think it has. I know for young parents, they always, when we do the ages and stages questionnaire, they're always worried that they think, oh, it's because you think I'm a young parent, I'm not going to be a good parent. And it's not. It's all ages of parents that we're seeing these developmental things with kids. And I really do believe some of it's environmental. So I don't know if that fits in with violence, but it does have an effect, because if you're a parent that's experiencing, you know, if you're a mum or a dad experiencing violence yourself, and then your children is acting up, you're not going to be as much patient, and then that affects you're not going to be as patient, and that affects the attachment, and that attachment relationship affects how children deal with adversity, right? So I think those are a few things. And having always lived in the city and worked in the city, I was really happy to see the high rates, the high rating for rural communities and services, because I think isolation is a huge factor. And, you know, our funders always look at the stats and how many people you can see. And when people can't come in because of buses, there's no transportation and stuff, the isolation really impacts violence. So I apologize. I wasn't one that included in my vote, and I usually do, because I think that isolation increases. So I apologize I didn't, but I'm really happy that others did, because we need to be mindful of that. We focus on, you know, kind of demographics and things like, you know, race and poverty. And growing up poor myself, I can attest poverty definitely was a factor in my life around the violence in my home, but isolation is a huge one. So anyway, thank you.
All right, well, we'll turn it back to Nicole to wrap up here.
Yeah, those are terrific points. All three of you made. And as Bill said, this is the beginning of a discussion. So maybe I'll just share my screen. I've got just a couple last slides here. And I'm just going to, all right. Okay, so next steps, you'll get a feedback survey. You can scan here to provide feedback, but we'll also be sending the links to you. And you'll get a report of today's meeting that will go to all the AVA team members. And I'm so pleased we recorded things, because we've got a lot of really great context and nuance from the conversations that certainly will add to what we voted on. There's another thing here. If you're not an AVA member, you can join now. Scan here to register. Send this to your friends. We're always looking to connect with people that are like-minded in trying to address these issues. And I just want to actually address a comment that Kendra made about the implementation is where we often find challenge, and that's one of the pillars of AVA. But one of the things we're focusing on is community organizations who might already have the will. And you're making me think we need to definitely go beyond community organizations to look at government officials and so on, like maybe through our connections that we're trying to make with the NAP influencers. And then, so thank you everyone for joining us today. You've got the Menti QR here as well. If you didn't get a chance to provide some answers into the Menti before, and you can do it now. What does being involved in AVA mean to you? We would love to hear your thoughts about that, and would share that in the report with you, along with your feedback. So I think we're finishing right on time. I'm just going to leave this slide up so you can use your phones and go to that QR about what AVA means to you, because we would love to hear. I'm doing it myself there. So there we go. So that is it for today. Thank you so much for joining us. As Bill said, we tried to make this a manageable part of your workday, and hope that it was. Have a wonderful rest of the day, everyone. And we'll be connecting with you again soon.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thanks so
you.
much.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.